The metallic echo of boots striking polished concrete reverberates through Naval Air Station Meridian like thunder before a storm. What you're about to witness will shatter everything you think you know about strength, respect, and hidden power. In the next few minutes, a decorated war hero will be humiliated by someone who has no idea he's about to destroy his own career. The moment of reckoning is coming, and when it hits, it will leave an entire military base speechless. Trust me, you need to see this until the very end. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Lieutenant Commander Jake Razor Williams strutted across the advanced tactical training facility like he owned every square inch of reinforced steel and regulation gray paint. His chest, adorned with ribbons that caught the harsh fluorescent lighting, pushed against his perfectly pressed Navy working uniform. Behind him, 3 other instructors followed in formation. Chief Petty Officer Rick "Tank" Morrison, whose biceps strained against his sleeves like they were competing for space. Petty Officer First Class Danny "Shark" Rodriguez, whose predatory smile suggested he enjoyed breaking recruits almost as much as he enjoyed his morning protein shake. And Senior Chief Tyler "Hammer" Brooks, whose reputation for crushing dreams was only matched by his collection of disciplinary citations. They moved with the synchronized arrogance of men who'd grown comfortable, wielding authority over those they perceived as beneath them. The morning briefing had just concluded, and 37 SEAL candidates were scattered throughout the facility, some attacking heavy bags with desperate intensity, others practicing room-clearing techniques with the kind of focused determination that separated those who might earn their trident from those who'd wash out before sunrise. Near the equipment maintenance station, almost invisible among the rows of tactical gear and weapons storage, worked someone the instructors had long since dismissed as irrelevant. Petty Officer Third Class Riley "Ghost" Thompson moved through her assigned duties with methodical precision, her slight frame barely 5 feet 6 inches and perhaps 130 pounds making her nearly invisible among the towering warriors who dominated this space. Her Navy working uniform was regulation perfect but showed the subtle signs of someone who worked behind the scenes. Slightly faded edges from industrial washing, small scuff marks on the knees from crawling through equipment spaces, and hands that bore the calluses of someone familiar with tools and maintenance work. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a flawless regulation bun, and her pale green eyes remained focused downward, seemingly absorbed in the mundane task of organizing equipment inventories. For 8 months, Riley had been assigned to maintenance support duties at NAS Meridian. 8 months of cleaning weapons, organizing gear, maintaining equipment, and remaining essentially invisible to the instructors and candidates who saw support personnel as background scenery. She'd perfected the art of efficient anonymity, completing her tasks with quiet competence, while avoiding the kind of attention that complicated lives and revealed secrets better left buried. The other support staff, Yeoman Second Class Amanda Pierce, who managed administrative functions with bureaucratic precision. Hospital Corpsman First Class David "Doc" Martinez, whose medical station was always immaculately organized. And Logistics Specialist Second Class Kevin "Supply" Johnson, who could locate any piece of equipment within 30 seconds, had grown comfortable with Riley's presence without really knowing anything substantial about her background. What none of them understood, what the instructor certainly didn't realize, and what would soon explode across this facility like a detonated flashbang, was that Riley Thompson was not what she appeared to be. Williams approached the maintenance station with the casual swagger of someone about to demonstrate his authority for the entertainment of his colleagues. The morning had been slow, the candidates were performing adequately, and he was in the mood for what he called team building, which usually involved humiliating someone who couldn't fight back. "Hey there, "Maintenance girl," Williams called out, his voice carrying enough volume to draw attention from nearby candidates and staff. The phrase dripped with condescension, designed to establish hierarchy and entertain his audience. "What's your rate again? I keep forgetting what you support people actually do around here." Riley paused in her inventory work, setting down her clipboard with deliberate care. When she looked up, her pale green eyes met Williams' gaze with a steadiness that lasted exactly 2 seconds, before dropping back to respectful deference. "Petty Officer 3rd Class, sir. Equipment maintenance and logistical support." Behind Williams, the other instructors began to gather, sensing entertainment in the way sharks detect blood in the water. Chief Morrison crossed his arms, his posture suggesting he was settling in for a show. Petty Officer Rodriguez nudged Senior Chief Brooks, who glanced over with the kind of smile that suggested he approved of whatever was about to unfold. "Petty Officer 3rd Class," Williams repeated, drawing out each word like he was explaining something to a particularly slow child. "Support personnel. Maintenance." He gestured around the facility with theatrical expansiveness. "Do you see all these warriors training here? These candidates pushing themselves beyond human limits to earn the right to call themselves SEALs?" Riley nodded silently, her expression neutral, her hands remaining steady on the clipboard, despite the growing attention from around the facility. "These men," Williams continued, his voice rising to ensure maximum audience participation, "represent the absolute peak of military capability. They're training to become America's most elite warriors. They'll go into combat zones where weakness means death, where hesitation means mission failure, where only the strongest, fastest, and most capable survive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Several candidates had stopped their training to watch, their young faces showing a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. They understood they were witnessing some kind of demonstration, but weren't sure whether they should participate, intervene, or simply observe. Williams moved closer to Riley's position, his superior height allowing him to literally look down on her. "And then we have support personnel. People who—" He paused, as if searching for the most accurate description. "People who organize things. People who clean things. People who make sure the real warriors have what they need to accomplish actual missions." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Riley remained motionless, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. But something in the quality of her stillness caught the attention of Master Chief Petty Officer Sarah Iron Kennedy, a 28-year veteran who'd been observing from her position near the administrative desk. Kennedy's experienced eyes noted details that others missed. The way Riley's feet were positioned in a modified fighting stance despite her casual appearance. The way her hands, though holding the clipboard, maintained the kind of relaxed readiness that suggested combat training. The way her peripheral awareness seemed to catalog every person and exit in the facility, even while appearing focused solely on Williams. That wasn't the posture of a maintenance worker. That was the stance of someone trained for situations where awareness meant survival. Williams stepped back slightly, creating space for what was clearly going to be a performance designed for maximum humiliation. His 3 fellow instructors had now formed a loose semicircle around the maintenance station, their body language screaming predatory anticipation. Chief Morrison cracked his knuckles audibly, the sound echoing through the facility like gunshots. Petty Officer Rodriguez pulled out his phone, apparently deciding this moment deserved documentation for later entertainment. Senior Chief Brooks positioned himself where he could observe both Riley's reaction and the growing audience of candidates who'd stopped their training to witness whatever was about to unfold. "You know what I think?" Williams continued, his voice carrying the kind of theatrical projection that demanded attention from everyone within 50 feet. "I think we've gotten soft around here. Too soft. Too willing to accommodate people who don't belong in a warrior environment. He gestured toward Riley with dismissive casualness, as if she were a piece of equipment that had been misplaced rather than a human being. Look at this. We've got maintenance personnel wandering around a SEAL training facility like they're part of the team. Like they understand what we do here. Like they deserve to breathe the same air as operators who've earned their place through blood, sweat, and proving they can handle impossible situations. The candidates watching this display showed varying degrees of discomfort. Some, the younger ones fresh from basic training, seemed uncertain whether this was some kind of official demonstration they were supposed to learn from. Others, those who'd been in the program longer, recognized the casual cruelty for what it was and shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether intervention would help or make things worse. Near the administrative station, Hospital Corpsman Martinez frowned deeply, his medical training making him automatically assess the stress levels of everyone involved. Yeoman Pierce had stopped her paperwork entirely, her bureaucratic instincts telling her that whatever was happening was likely to generate reports and possibly investigations. Logistics Specialist Johnson moved closer, his protective instincts toward fellow support personnel warring with his awareness that confronting instructors could end his career. Master Chief Kennedy remained motionless near her desk, but her eyes had narrowed to the kind of focused assessment that suggested she was cataloging details for later evaluation. Something about this situation was triggering. Her decades of experience with personnel, management, and potential command climate issues. Williams was just getting started. "Chief Morrison," he called out, without taking his eyes off Riley. "Remind me again what the failure rate is for SEAL training. What percentage of candidates actually make it through to earn their trident?" Morrison's response was immediate and delivered with the precision of someone who'd memorized statistics for the specific purpose of intimidating people. "Approximately 75 to 80% failure rate, sir. Only the strongest, most dedicated, most capable individuals survive the training pipeline. Everyone else washes out." "Exactly," Williams nodded with satisfaction. 75 to 80% failure rate. Men who've trained their entire lives, who've dedicated everything to becoming elite warriors, who've pushed themselves beyond normal human limits, and most of them still fail. Most of them still aren't good enough to wear the trident. He moved even closer to Riley, his physical presence designed to intimidate through proximity and implied threat. And yet somehow we're supposed to believe that support personnel people who've never faced combat, never been tested under fire, never proven they can handle life or death situations, somehow deserve respect. Somehow deserve to be treated like they belong in the same category as operators. Rodriguez looked up from his phone, grinning with the kind of malicious enjoyment that suggested he was already planning how to share this footage with others. "Maybe we should test her, sir. See if maintenance girl here has what it takes to handle real warrior training." The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge, and Williams' eyes lit up with the kind of inspiration that usually preceded terrible decisions. "That's actually not a bad idea." "Rodriguez," Williams said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who'd just discovered an entertaining new game. "We've got all these candidates here working their asses off to prove they deserve to wear the uniform. Maybe our support personnel should demonstrate they deserve to be in the same facility." Brooks stepped forward, his senior rank giving his words additional weight. "Could be educational for the candidates too. Show them what happens when people who haven't earned their place try to operate at our level. Might motivate them to work harder." Riley remained perfectly still throughout this exchange, her breathing steady, her expression neutral, her hands maintaining their grip on the clipboard with exactly the same pressure as before. But Kennedy, watching from across the facility, noticed something that the instructors, focused on their performance, completely missed. Riley's pulse point, visible at her neck, showed no elevation. Her breathing pattern hadn't changed. Her posture hadn't shifted toward defensive positioning, despite being surrounded by 4 larger, aggressive men who were clearly building toward some kind of confrontation. That wasn't the response of someone intimidated or afraid. That was the response of someone who was completely comfortable with the tactical situation. Someone who was assessing rather than reacting. Someone who was waiting rather than preparing to flee. Kennedy had seen that kind of controlled calm before, but never from maintenance personnel. Williams clapped his hands together with the sharp crack of someone calling for attention. "All right, candidates. Gather around. We're going to have an impromptu demonstration. Everyone stop what you're doing and form up near the center mat." The 37 candidates immediately responded, their training making compliance automatic even when the situation felt wrong. They formed a loose circle around the central training area, their faces showing confusion mixed with the kind of nervous anticipation that suggested they understood they were about to witness something significant. Today's lesson, Williams announced with theatrical authority, is about standards. About what it means to earn your place in an elite unit. About the difference between those who've proven themselves under fire and those who ... He gestured dismissively toward Riley. Those who organize. Equipment. Chief Morrison had moved to the weapons rack, selecting items with deliberate care. "What do you think, sir? Basic field stripping exercise? Combat fitness assessment? Maybe some close quarters tactical movements?" "All excellent options," Williams replied, his smile growing wider. "But let's start simple. After all, we wouldn't want to overwhelm our maintenance specialist with anything too challenging." He turned to address Riley directly, his voice carrying the kind of false courtesy that made the insult more obvious rather than less. "Tell me, Petty Officer Thompson, in all your extensive equipment maintenance experience, have you ever actually handled the weapons you clean? Do you know the difference between an M4 and an M16? Can you identify the basic components of a standard service rifle?" Riley looked up from her clipboard, meeting Williams' eyes with the same steady gaze she'd maintained throughout the confrontation. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying just enough volume to be heard by the assembled candidates without seeming to project. "Yes, sir. I'm familiar with standard service weapons and their maintenance requirements." "Familiar," Williams repeated, drawing out the word like he was tasting something unpleasant. "That's a very diplomatic way of saying you've looked at them while cleaning them." Rodriguez had positioned himself where he could capture the best angle with his phone, clearly anticipating entertainment value from whatever was about to happen. "Maybe she can tell us about the different types of ammunition, sir. Really demonstrate her familiarity with military equipment." Brooks nodded approvingly. "Educational opportunity for everyone. Show the candidates what happens when people try to operate outside their actual capabilities." The circle of candidates was growing increasingly uncomfortable. Several of them exchanged glances that suggested they recognized this was less about education and more about humiliation. Tommy "Ace" Harrison, a 19-year-old from rural Montana who'd been struggling with the physical requirements but excelling at technical skills, shifted his weight nervously. Marcus "Tank" Washington, a former college football player whose size made him appear confident but whose eyes showed growing concern about the situation, crossed his arms and frowned. Near the back of the group, Alexander "Ghost" Petrov, a quiet candidate who'd immigrated from Eastern Europe and brought with him a perspective shaped by different military traditions, watched with the kind of careful assessment that suggested he was evaluating more than just the immediate situation. Kennedy had moved closer to the group, her position allowing her to observe both the instructors and Riley with equal attention. Her decades of experience were sending warning signals that something about this entire situation was not what it appeared to be. But Williams was just getting started with what he clearly believed would be an entertaining demonstration of why hierarchy, mattered and why some people belonged in positions of authority while others belonged in positions of service. He had no idea that he was about to learn exactly how wrong assumptions could be. Williams gestured toward the weapons maintenance table where several disassembled M4 carbines lay in organized chaos, their components separated for routine cleaning and inspection. The afternoon light streaming through the facility's high windows caught the metal surfaces, creating an almost theatrical spotlight on what he clearly intended to be the stage for Riley's public humiliation. "Since you claim to be familiar with service weapons," Williams announced, his voice carrying the kind of patronizing tone typically reserved for explaining basic concepts to particularly slow children, "let's put that familiarity to the test. Chief Morrison, would you be so kind as to demonstrate proper field stripping procedure for our maintenance specialist here?" Morrison stepped forward with the fluid confidence of someone who'd performed this demonstration hundreds of times for countless candidates. His movements were crisp, professional, designed to showcase both technical competence and instructional authority. He approached the weapons table like a surgeon approaching an operating theater, his hands already moving toward the disassembled components with practiced efficiency. "Standard M4 carbine," Morrison began, his voice carrying the rhythmic cadence of military instruction. "Gas-operated, magazine-fed, selective fire weapon. Basic field stripping involves separation of upper and lower receivers, removal of bolt carrier group, extraction of charging handle, and detailed cleaning of all components." His hands moved with mechanical precision, each motion demonstrating years of muscle memory built through countless repetitions. Upper receiver separated from lower receiver with a subtle click. Bolt carrier group extracted smoothly, the metal components catching the overhead lighting as they moved. Charging handle removed with practiced efficiency, the entire process flowing like a choreographed performance. "Time to completion," Morrison announced, glancing at his tactical watch with satisfaction. 1 minute 37 seconds. That's instructor standard, well within operational parameters for field conditions. The assembled candidates watched with varying degrees of attention, some taking mental notes, others simply observing the demonstration with the kind of focused concentration that military training demanded. Tommy Harrison leaned forward slightly, his technical aptitude making him naturally interested in the mechanical aspects of the procedure. Marcus Washington nodded approvingly, his competitive nature automatically cataloging the performance benchmarks. Alexander Petrov remained motionless, his analytical mind processing not just the demonstration itself, but the dynamics of the entire situation. Williams clapped slowly, each sound echoing through the facility with theatrical emphasis. "Outstanding demonstration, Chief. Precise, efficient. Exactly what we expect from qualified personnel." He turned toward Riley, his expression shifting to something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so obviously manufactured for effect. "Now, Petty Officer Thompson, I want you to understand that we're not trying to embarrass you. This is purely educational. We want to help you understand the difference between familiarity and actual capability, between supporting warriors and being a warrior." Riley set her clipboard down on the nearby equipment table, her movements deliberate and unhurried. When she looked up at Williams, her pale green eyes showed no trace of anxiety or intimidation. "I understand, sir." Rodriguez had positioned himself for optimal recording angle, his phone capturing not just Riley, but also the reactions of the watching candidates. "This should be interesting," he murmured to Brooks, who nodded with the kind of anticipation that suggested he was already planning how to incorporate this moment into future training scenarios. What none of the instructors noticed, but what Master Chief Kennedy observed with growing intensity, was the way Riley approached the weapons table. Her stride was measured, confident, showing none of the hesitation that would be expected from someone about to attempt something beyond their capabilities. Her hands, when she reached for the first component, moved with the kind of automatic precision that spoke of deep familiarity rather than theoretical knowledge. Williams had positioned himself where he could observe both Riley's performance and the reactions of the watching candidates. "Remember, everyone," he called out to the assembled group, "this is about understanding standards, about recognizing the difference between those who've earned their place through proven capability and those who—" He paused dramatically. "Those who support the mission from behind the scenes." Rayleigh's hands found the upper receiver, her grip automatically positioning with the kind of tactical hold that suggested muscle memory built through extensive repetition. Her fingers moved to the appropriate contact points without visual guidance, her thumbs finding the exact pressure locations that allowed for efficient manipulation of the component. Chief Morrison, standing nearby with his arms crossed, watched with the kind of professional interest that came from years of evaluating technical performance. His initial expectation had been entertainment at Rayleigh's expense, but something about her initial handling of the equipment was triggering his instructor instincts in unexpected ways. "Interesting grip technique," he murmured to Brooks, his voice carrying just enough volume to be heard by the nearby candidates. "More tactical than I would have expected from maintenance personnel." Brooks nodded, his attention now focused more intently on Riley's movements. Muscle memory suggests more hands-on experience than typical support roles would provide. Riley lifted the upper receiver, her movements flowing smoothly into the next phase of the assembly process. Her hands moved to the bolt carrier group with automatic precision, selecting the component without visual search, positioning it for installation with the kind of efficiency that came from countless repetitions. Williams, still focused on what he expected to be an entertaining failure, missed the subtle shift in attention from the watching candidates. Several of them had straightened slightly, their own training allowing them to recognize technical competence when they saw it. Tommy Harrison's eyes widened as he observed grip techniques that matched what he'd been learning in advanced weapons courses. Marcus Washington uncrossed his arms, his competitive instincts recognizing performance that exceeded expectations. Alexander Petrov remained motionless, but his analytical mind was cataloging details that didn't match the expected profile of support personnel. The way Riley's peripheral awareness remained active even while focused on the technical task. The way her breathing pattern remained steady despite being the center of attention from nearly 40 people. The way her posture maintained tactical readiness, even while appearing focused solely on the weapons. Assembly. Riley's hands moved through the assembly sequence with increasing fluidity. Bolt carrier group installed smoothly, the components sliding home with the kind of mechanical precision that spoke of perfect alignment achieved through experience rather than luck. Upper and lower receivers joined with a subtle click that indicated proper seating. Charging handle installed with efficient motion. The entire process flowing like a demonstration rather than a struggle. Hospital Corpsman Martinez, watching from his position near the medical station, found himself leaning forward with professional interest. His medical training had taught him to observe fine motor control and stress responses, and what he was seeing didn't match what he would expect from someone attempting an unfamiliar task under pressure. Yeoman. Pierce had abandoned her paperwork entirely, her administrative instincts telling her that whatever was happening was likely to require documentation and possibly investigation. Logistics specialist Johnson had moved closer to the circle, his protective feelings toward fellow support personnel now mixed with curiosity about capabilities he hadn't previously suspected. Master Chief Kennedy had positioned herself where she could observe both the technical performance and the reactions of all personnel involved. Her decades of experience were providing context that the instructors, focused on their expected entertainment, were completely missing. Riley set the completed weapon down on the table and stepped back, her movements maintaining the same controlled precision she'd demonstrated throughout the entire process. When she looked up at Williams, her expression remained neutral, professional, showing none of the triumph or relief that might be expected from someone who just exceeded expectations. Williams stared at the completed weapon, then at his tactical watch, then back at Riley. His expression was shifting from confident anticipation to confusion. The timeline for the assembly not matching his expectations for someone struggling with unfamiliar equipment. "Time to completion," Morrison announced, his voice carrying a note of professional surprise. 53 seconds. The silence that followed was heavy with implications that most of the watching personnel didn't yet understand. 53 seconds wasn't just competent performance from a maintenance specialist. 53 seconds was competitive with instructor-level capabilities. 53 seconds suggested training and experience that didn't match Rayleigh's official position or apparent background. Rodriguez lowered his phone slightly, his anticipated entertainment shifting into something more complex. Brooks unfolded his arms, his attention now focused entirely on trying to understand what he'd just witnessed. The watching candidates exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to recognize that this demonstration wasn't unfolding according to anyone's expectations. And Williams, staring at the stopwatch display that showed a time that shouldn't have been possible from someone he'd dismissed as irrelevant support personnel, felt the first stirring of doubt about assumptions he'd made and the wisdom of the performance he'd orchestrated. Williams stared at the assembled weapon, his confident smirk beginning to crack at the edges like paint under pressure. The number on Morrison's stopwatch seemed to burn in the air between them. 53 seconds, a time that shouldn't have been possible from someone he'd spent the last 10 minutes dismissing as irrelevant support personnel. "That's..." Williams began, then stopped, his theatrical confidence stumbling over the reality of what had just occurred. "That's not standard maintenance training." Rodriguez had stopped recording, his phone now hanging forgotten at his side as he processed what he'd witnessed. His anticipated entertainment had transformed into something far more complex, something that made his skin crawl with the uncomfortable realization that he might have just documented his own unit's spectacular misjudgment. "Run it again," Williams commanded, his voice carrying a sharp edge that suggested his authority felt threatened. Equipment might have been pre-positioned for easy assembly, or maybe the components were already partially connected. "Run it again with different components." Chief Morrison moved to comply, but his movements had lost their earlier theatrical precision. His instructor instincts were sending warning signals that something fundamental about this situation had shifted beyond his understanding. As he disassembled a different M4 from the maintenance rack, his eyes kept returning to Riley, cataloging details he'd previously overlooked. The way she stood at parade rest without apparent conscious effort. The way her peripheral awareness seemed to track every person in the facility, even while appearing focused solely on Williams. The way her hands, now clasped behind her back in standard military posture, showed calluses in locations that suggested extensive weapons handling rather than routine maintenance work. Brooks stepped closer to the weapons table, his senior experience making him more cautious about rushing to judgment. "Sir," he said quietly to Williams, "might want to consider that exceptional performance doesn't necessarily indicate deception. Some support personnel cross-train extensively. Some have prior experience that doesn't show up in routine personnel files." But Williams was committed to his course now, his authority having been questioned in front of 37 candidates and multiple junior personnel. Backing down would represent a loss of face that his ego couldn't tolerate, regardless of the evidence suggesting his assumptions might have been catastrophically wrong. "Different weapon," Williams announced to the watching crowd, his voice rising to ensure everyone understood this was still his demonstration, still under his control. "Different components. Let's see if maintenance girl here can repeat her beginner's luck." The assembled candidates were beginning to show visible discomfort with the situation. Tommy Harrison shifted his weight nervously, his instincts telling him that continuing this demonstration was unlikely to end well for anyone involved. Marcus Washington uncrossed his arms, his competitive nature warring with his growing sense that the instructors were making a mistake that would have consequences beyond the immediate moment. Alexander Petrov remained motionless, but his analytical mind was processing implications that extended far beyond weapons assembly times. His experience with different military cultures had taught him to recognize when authority figures were operating from incomplete information, and everything about this situation suggested that critical details were missing from the instructor's understanding. Near the administrative area, Master Chief Kennedy had moved to her computer terminal and was accessing personnel databases with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she was researching something specific. Her decades of experience had taught her to trust her instincts when situations didn't match their apparent surface explanations. And every detail about Rayleigh's performance was triggering warnings that demanded investigation. Hospital Corpsman Martinez approached the circle of candidates, his medical training making him automatically assess stress levels and potential for escalation. What he observed in the body language of the instructors, particularly Williams, suggested growing agitation and defensiveness that could lead to poor decision-making and potentially dangerous situations. Morrison finished disassembling the second weapon, deliberately scrambling the components to ensure no advantageous positioning. Different magazine, different bolt carrier group, different charging handle, he announced. Components have been mixed from multiple weapons to ensure no familiarity advantage. Williams positioned himself where he could observe both Riley's performance and the reactions of the watching personnel. This time, he announced, we're going to make it interesting. Time limit of 2 minutes. If Maintenance Specialist Thompson can complete the assembly within that time frame, she have proven her point. If not, he paused for dramatic effect. If not, then we'll have demonstrated why some people belong in support roles and others belong in operational positions. The implicit threat in his words was clear to everyone present. This had evolved beyond simple demonstration into something approaching an ultimatum. With Riley's professional reputation and potentially her career hanging in the balance based on her ability to perform under artificially imposed pressure, Riley approached the weapons table for the second time, her movements maintaining the same measured confidence she'd displayed throughout the entire confrontation. But now, several of the watching personnel were observing her with different eyes, noting details that previous assumptions had prevented them from recognizing. Yeoman Pierce found herself cataloging inconsistencies between Riley's apparent position and her demonstrated capabilities. Logistics Specialist Johnson moved closer to the circle, his protective instincts toward fellow support personnel now complicated by growing curiosity about exactly who Riley Thompson actually was. Williams pulled out his own stopwatch, holding it prominently where the watching candidates could observe the countdown. 2 minutes, he announced. Starting now. Rayleigh's hands moved to the scrambled components with immediate precision, but this time, several people in the watching crowd were prepared to observe her technique, rather than simply waiting for entertainment at her expense. What they saw challenged every assumption they'd made about support personnel capabilities and training backgrounds. Her grip technique was flawless, suggesting muscle memory built through extensive repetition. Her component selection was automatic, requiring no visual search or hesitation. Her assembly sequence followed advanced tactical protocols rather than basic maintenance procedures, indicating training that extended far beyond routine equipment familiarization. Tommy Harrison leaned forward, his technical aptitude allowing him to recognize advanced techniques that matched specialized training curricula. "That's not standard field stripping," he murmured to Marcus Washington. "That's advanced tactical assembly." The kind they teach in specialized weapons courses. Marcus Washington nodded, his competitive instincts recognizing performance levels that exceeded not just expectations, but logical explanations. Her grip positioning is perfect. Better than perfect. That's competitive level technique. Alexander Petrov remained silent, but his analytical mind was processing tactical implications. The way Riley maintained situational awareness even while focused on technical tasks. The way her breathing pattern remained steady despite artificial pressure and time constraints. The way her posture suggested readiness for action, even while appearing focused solely on weapons assembly. Morrison watched the assembly process with growing professional interest, his instructor instincts recognizing capabilities that didn't match any support personnel training he'd ever encountered. "That's not maintenance technique," he said quietly to Brooks. "That's operational level competence." Brooks nodded grimly, his senior experience making him increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of Williams' demonstration. This isn't going to end the way he thinks it is. Rayleigh's hands moved through the assembly sequence with increasing fluidity, each component sliding into place with mechanical precision that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Upper and lower receivers joined smoothly. Bolt carrier group installed flawlessly. Charging handle positioned perfectly. The entire process flowing like an advanced demonstration rather than someone struggling with unfamiliar equipment under artificial pressure. At the administrative terminal, Master Chief Kennedy's research was yielding results that made her expression increasingly grim. Classification codes in Riley's personnel file that indicated restricted information. Training records that showed gaps requiring special clearance to access. Performance evaluations that used terminology typically reserved for specialized operations. Personnel. Williams watched his stopwatch with growing agitation. The rapidly advancing numbers not matching his expectations for someone who should have been struggling with equipment beyond their training level. 30 seconds. 45 seconds. 1 minute. The assembly continuing with professional competence that made his chest tighten with the growing realization that his demonstration might not prove what he'd intended. Riley set the completed weapon down on the table and stepped back, her movements maintaining the same controlled precision she'd demonstrated throughout both assemblies. When she looked up at Williams, her pale green eyes showed no trace of triumph or relief. Just the same steady professionalism she'd maintained since the confrontation began. Morrison announced the time in a voice that carried notes of professional respect mixed with confusion. 47 seconds. 47 seconds. 6 seconds faster than her first attempt. Performance improvement under pressure that indicated training and experience levels that made everyone in the facility reconsider every assumption they'd made about who Riley Thompson actually was and what her presence at Naval Air Station Meridian actually meant. Williams stared at the completed weapon, then at his stopwatch, then at Riley, his confident authority beginning to crumble under the weight of evidence that his fundamental assumptions about hierarchy, capability, and professional competence might have been catastrophically wrong. The silence that followed was heavy with implications that would soon explode across the facility like a detonated depth charge, changing everything anyone thought they knew about support personnel, hidden capabilities, and the dangerous consequences of judging people by their apparent positions rather than their actual qualifications. The atmosphere in the facility had shifted from theatrical entertainment to something far more serious. Like the moment before a storm when the air pressure drops and everyone instinctively knows that shelter might be necessary. Williams stood frozen beside the weapons table, his stopwatch still displaying the impossible number 47 seconds, while his mind struggled to process implications that threatened the foundation of everything he believed about military hierarchy and professional Competence. Rodriguez had completely abandoned his phone recording, the device now hanging forgotten in his hand as he stared at Riley with the kind of intense focus typically reserved for threat assessment. His entertainment had transformed into something that made his stomach clench with growing dread. The realization dawning that he might have just witnessed something that would require explanations he wasn't prepared to provide. "That's not possible," Williams said finally, his voice lacking the theatrical projection he'd maintained throughout the demonstration. The words came out as more of a whisper, directed at himself rather than the assembled crowd. "Support personnel don't perform at operational levels. They don't have access to advanced training. They don't develop muscle memory that exceeds instructor capabilities." Chief Morrison approached the weapons table with measured steps, his professional instincts overriding his earlier entertainment-focused approach. As he examined the completed weapon, his experienced hands checking the assembly for proper component seating and mechanical function, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "Perfect assembly," he announced to the watching crowd, his voice carrying professional respect that hadn't been present earlier. "Every component properly seated. Mechanical function optimal. No shortcuts, no errors, no indications of luck or accident." He looked up from the weapon to meet Williams' eyes. "This is advanced tactical proficiency." Brooks stepped forward, his senior rank giving his observations additional weight. "Sir," he said quietly to Williams, "we might want to consider that our assumptions about Petty Officer Thompson's background may have been incomplete." But Williams was too deep into his demonstration to retreat gracefully, his authority having been questioned in front of nearly 40 personnel. His ego, already bruised by the unexpected competence he'd witnessed, couldn't tolerate the implication that he'd made a fundamental error in judgment about someone he'd dismissed as irrelevant. "Advanced training doesn't appear out of nowhere," Williams declared, his voice rising as he struggled to reassert control over a situation that was rapidly escaping his understanding. "If maintenance personnel demonstrate capabilities beyond their stated qualifications, that suggests deception. That suggests someone hasn't been honest about their background, their training, their actual role here." The assembled candidates were growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the confrontation. Tommy Harrison exchanged worried glances with Marcus Washington, both of them recognizing that their instructors were moving into territory that seemed dangerous for everyone involved. Alexander Petrov remained silent, but his analytical mind was cataloging details that suggested this situation was about to escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. Near the administrative area, Master Chief Kennedy had abandoned her computer research and was moving toward the demonstration area with purposeful strides. Her decades of experience had taught her to recognize when situations were approaching points of no return. And everything about Williams' body language suggested he was about to make decisions that would have serious consequences. Hospital. Corman Martinez had positioned himself where he could observe stress levels and physical reactions from all personnel involved. His medical training was sending warning signals that emotional pressure was building toward potentially explosive levels, particularly in Williams, whose defensive posturing suggested increasing agitation. Williams gestured toward Riley with sharp, aggressive movements. "Maybe it's time we got some honest answers about who you really are and what you're actually doing here. Maybe it's time we stopped pretending that exceptional performance from support personnel is normal or acceptable." Riley remained at attention beside the weapons table, her posture unchanged despite the increasingly hostile tone of Williams' questioning. When she spoke, her voice maintained the same steady professionalism she'd demonstrated throughout the entire confrontation. "I am Petty Officer 3rd Class Riley Thompson, assigned to equipment maintenance and logistical support duties at Naval Air Station Meridian. My performance reflects thorough familiarity with standard military equipment as required by my position." "Thorough familiarity," Williams repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. 47 seconds is not thorough familiarity. 47 seconds is specialized training. 47 seconds is operational capability that requires security, clearances and background investigations, and training pipelines that don't exist for maintenance personnel. Rodriguez had moved closer to the confrontation, his earlier entertainment completely forgotten as he recognized the serious implications of what was developing. "Sir," he said carefully, "maybe we should continue this discussion in private, away from the candidates." But Williams was committed to his course now, his authority feeling threatened and his professional judgment being questioned in front of subordinates whose respect he needed to maintain. "No," he declared firmly. "This is exactly the kind of teaching moment our candidates need to witness. They need to understand what happens when people operate outside their designated roles. They need to see what happens when deception is exposed." The candidates were beginning to show signs of serious discomfort with the situation. Several of them had moved closer together, their instincts telling them that whatever was happening was moving beyond normal training demonstrations, into territory that felt dangerous and unpredictable. Master Chief Kennedy reached the edge of the circle surrounding the weapons table, her presence immediately noticed by everyone present. Her rank commanded automatic respect, but more importantly, her expression suggested she had information that would change everyone's understanding of the situation. "Lieutenant Commander Williams," Kennedy said, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made everyone in the facility stop what they were doing to listen. "I need to speak with you immediately, privately." Williams turned toward Kennedy, his agitation making him less cautious about challenging senior personnel than wisdom would typically suggest. "Master Chief, we're in the middle of an important training demonstration. Our candidates need to understand. The candidates need to understand when to step back from situations that are beyond their current level of clearance," Kennedy interrupted, her voice carrying implications that made several people in the crowd straighten with sudden attention. "And right now, this conversation is moving into territory that requires immediate reassessment." Riley remained motionless during this exchange, but something in the quality of her stillness had changed. The relaxed professionalism she'd maintained throughout Williams' harassment had shifted into something more alert, more focused, like someone preparing for situations that required different kinds of responses than patient tolerance. Yeoman Pierce had abandoned her administrative station and was moving toward the demonstration area, her bureaucratic instincts telling her that whatever was developing would require immediate documentation and possibly emergency notifications to higher authority levels. Logistics Specialist Johnson positioned himself where he could observe both the continuing confrontation and potential exit routes, his protective feelings toward fellow support personnel now complicated by growing awareness that the situation was escalating beyond anyone's ability to predict or control. Williams looked around the circle of watching personnel, recognizing that his demonstration had attracted far more attention than he'd intended and was developing in directions he hadn't anticipated. But his commitment to proving his point about hierarchy and appropriate roles had pushed him past the point where graceful retreat was possible. "One more test," he announced to the assembled crowd, his voice carrying the kind of desperate authority that suggested he was gambling everything on one final attempt to prove his assumptions correct. "If Petty Officer Thompson truly has the advanced capabilities she's demonstrated, then she should be able to handle more complex challenges." Kennedy stepped forward, her expression showing the kind of grim determination that suggested she was prepared to intervene decisively to prevent what she saw coming. "Lieutenant Commander, that's enough. Stand down immediately." But Williams was beyond the reach of reasonable counsel, his authority feeling threatened and his professional reputation hanging on his ability to prove that his original assessment had been correct. regardless of mounting evidence suggesting otherwise. Close quarters combat demonstration, Williams declared, his voice rising to ensure everyone could hear. If maintenance personnel truly deserve to be treated as equals to operational personnel, then they should be able to demonstrate operational capabilities under realistic conditions. The silence that followed was heavy with the recognition that the situation had just escalated beyond anyone's ability to control, and whatever happened next would have consequences that extended far beyond the immediate moment. The words, close quarters, combat demonstration, hung in the air like a live grenade with the pin pulled, and Master Chief Kennedy's face went from concerned to absolutely livid in the space of a heartbeat. Her 28 years of military experience had taught her to recognize when situations crossed from poor judgment into potential career-ending disasters, and Williams had just launched himself over that line with spectacular recklessness. Lieutenant Commander Williams, you will stand down immediately, Kennedy commanded, her voice carrying the kind of absolute authority that made every person in the facility freeze in place. That is a direct order from a senior non-commissioned officer with full authority over training safety protocols. But Williams was operating from a position of desperation now, his professional credibility hanging by threads that were fraying with each passing second. The candidates were watching, the junior instructors were questioning his judgment, and his entire authority structure was crumbling because a maintenance worker had demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything he believed about military hierarchy. Master Chief, with all due respect, Williams said, his voice carrying the kind of strained courtesy that indicated he was about to ignore her order entirely. This is an important teaching moment for our candidates. They need to understand the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical capability. They need to see what happens when someone attempts to operate beyond their actual training level. Rodriguez had gone pale, his earlier entertainment completely forgotten as he recognized the catastrophic implications of what Williams was proposing. Close quarters combat training involved physical contact, controlled violence, and the potential for serious injury if participants weren't properly matched in terms of training and experience. Sir, Rodriguez said urgently, safety protocols require. I'm aware of safety protocols, Williams snapped, his agitation making him increasingly reckless. I'm also aware that our candidates need to understand reality. They need to see what happens when people who haven't earned their place through proper channels try to operate at levels they haven't achieved through legitimate training. Brooks stepped forward, his senior instructor experience making him acutely aware of the liability issues Williams was creating. Sir, close quarters combat demonstration requires documented training verification, medical clearance, safety oversight, and I'm providing oversight, Williams declared. I'm ensuring our candidates receive educational value from this demonstration. Chief Morrison had moved closer to the weapons table, ostensibly to secure the equipment, but actually positioning himself where he could intervene if the situation escalated beyond verbal confrontation. His instructor instincts were screaming warnings about uncontrolled variables and unpredictable outcomes. The assembled candidates were showing visible signs of distress about the situation's direction. Tommy Harrison had backed away from the immediate area, his instincts telling him that whatever was about to happen would not end well for anyone involved. Marcus Washington remained in place but had shifted into a ready stance, his athletic background making him automatically prepare for potential emergency response. Alexander Petrov watched the developing confrontation with the kind of analytical focus that suggested he was cataloging details for later evaluation. His experience with different military cultures had taught him to recognize when authority figures were making decisions based on emotion rather than rational assessment. And everything about Williams' behavior suggested impaired judgment. Hospital corpsman Martinez had moved to his medical station and was retrieving emergency response equipment. his professional training making him automatically prepare for potential injuries. His assessment of the situation suggested that controlled demonstrations had the potential to become uncontrolled incidents, with serious medical consequences. Riley remained at attention beside the weapons table, but her posture had shifted subtly into something that suggested heightened awareness rather than passive compliance. Her peripheral vision was tracking multiple potential threats. Her breathing had adjusted to optimal oxygen levels, and her center of balance had shifted into something that suggested readiness for kinetic engagement. Master Chief Kennedy reached for her radio, her intention clearly to contact higher authority and terminate the demonstration through official channels. But Williams saw her movement and interpreted it as challenge to his authority rather than appropriate safety intervention. "Master Chief," Williams said sharply, "I am the senior instructor present, and I am conducting an authorized training demonstration. Unless you have specific evidence of safety violations, your intervention is premature and inappropriate." Kennedy's expression shifted into something that suggested Williams had just made a mistake that would have consequences extending far beyond the immediate situation. "Lieutenant Commander, you are about to create an incident that will require investigation, documentation, and explanations to flag-level officers. I strongly recommend you reconsider your course of action." But Williams was beyond the reach of reasonable counsel, his ego having committed him to a path that wouldn't allow retreat without complete loss of face. "The demonstration will proceed as planned," he announced to the assembled crowd. "Petty Officer Thompson, step forward to the training mat." The central training mat was a regulation combat training surface, designed for controlled sparring and tactical demonstrations. Surrounded by safety equipment and positioned under optimal lighting, it was the standard location for close-quarters combat instruction and evaluation. Riley looked at the mat, then at Williams, then at the circle of watching personnel whose faces showed varying degrees of concern, curiosity, and apprehension. When she spoke, her voice maintained the same steady professionalism she'd demonstrated throughout the entire confrontation. "Sir, I respectfully request clarification of the demonstration parameters. What specific techniques are you requesting me to demonstrate?" Williams smiled with the kind of satisfaction that suggested he believed he was finally regaining control of the situation. "Basic self-defense techniques. Simple defensive movements. Nothing beyond what any military personnel should be capable of performing if they've received standard training." Rodriguez had positioned his phone to record again, but his hands were shaking slightly as he recognized the potential for this demonstration to go catastrophically wrong. "Sir, maybe we should start with basic movements. Static demonstrations. No contact, no dynamic engagement." "Dynamic engagement is exactly what our candidates need to observe," Williams declared. "They need to understand what real capability looks like compared to theoretical knowledge." Brooks had moved to the edge of the training mat, ostensibly to provide safety oversight, but actually positioning himself to intervene if the demonstration exceeded safe parameters. His experience with close-quarters combat training had taught him to recognize when situations were developing beyond controllable limits. Riley stepped onto the training mat with movements that suggested familiarity with combat surfaces and tactical engagement protocols. Her positioning was automatic, professional, showing none of the hesitation that would be expected from someone about to attempt techniques beyond their training level. Williams joined her on the mat, his movements theatrical and designed for audience impact. His physical advantages were obvious: 6 inches of height, 50 pounds of weight, years of documented combat training and instructor experience. To everyone watching, the demonstration appeared to be a mismatch that would clearly illustrate the difference between actual capability and theoretical knowledge. "Basic defensive positioning," Williams announced to the watching candidates. Watch how trained personnel maintain situational awareness, balance, and readiness for engagement. He moved into a standard combat stance, his posture demonstrating textbook technique and professional competence. His position relative to Riley emphasized their physical disparities and suggested that the upcoming demonstration would clearly illustrate why some people belonged in operational roles while others belonged in support positions. Riley's response was immediate and absolutely perfect. Her defensive stance was flawless, feet positioned for optimal balance and mobility, hands positioned for protection and counter-engagement, center of gravity lowered for stability and explosive movement potential. Her positioning showed muscle memory built through extensive repetition, suggesting training that extended far beyond basic self-defense instruction. Morrison observed her stance with growing professional interest. "That's not standard defensive positioning," he murmured to Brooks. "That's advanced tactical engagement protocol." Brooks nodded grimly. "Competition-level technique. Maybe beyond competition level." Williams began to demonstrate basic engagement techniques, his movements designed to showcase proper form, while allowing Riley to demonstrate appropriate defensive responses. But as soon as kinetic contact began, it became immediately apparent that the situation was not developing according to his expectations. Riley's defensive responses were not just adequate, they were absolutely exceptional. Her movement efficiency was perfect. Her counter-engagement timing was flawless. Her tactical awareness was complete and comprehensive. Every technique she demonstrated suggested training levels that made everyone in the facility reconsider every assumption they'd made about her background and qualifications. And Williams, committed to his demonstration but increasingly aware that something fundamental about the situation was beyond his understanding, found himself engaging with someone whose capabilities exceeded every parameter he'd used to evaluate her competence. The demonstration was about to become something entirely different than what anyone had expected. Within the first 3 seconds of kinetic engagement, Williams realized he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. Riley's defensive responses weren't just competent, they were surgically precise, demonstrating levels of training that made his instructor credentials feel inadequate by comparison. Her movement efficiency was perfect, her timing flawless, her spatial awareness so complete that she seemed to anticipate his techniques before he fully committed to them. What had begun as a demonstration designed to highlight the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical capability had transformed into something that made Williams question everything he understood about military training hierarchies and professional competence. Riley wasn't struggling to keep up with his techniques, she was controlling the engagement with such subtlety that it took him several exchanges to realize what was happening. Chief Morrison watched from the edge of the training mat with growing amazement, his instructor experience allowing him to recognize technical proficiency that exceeded standard parameters. "That's not defensive training," he said quietly to Brooks, his voice carrying notes of professional respect mixed with confusion. "That's offensive capability being deliberately restrained." Brooks nodded, his senior experience making him increasingly uncomfortable with what he was observing. "She's controlling the engagement tempo. Williams thinks he's demonstrating techniques, but she's managing his movements to prevent escalation beyond safe parameters." The assembled candidates were witnessing something that challenged their understanding of military capability and training standards. Tommy Harrison leaned forward, his technical aptitude allowing him to recognize advanced techniques that exceeded anything he'd encountered in standard training curricula. Marcus Washington had shifted into a ready stance, his athletic background making him automatically assess the physical dynamics of what was developing on the training mat. Alexander Petrov remained motionless, But his analytical mind was processing tactical implications that extended far beyond the immediate demonstration. The level of control. Riley was demonstrating suggested training. Backgrounds that didn't match any support. Personnel protocols he'd encountered in different military systems. Williams attempted to increase the engagement intensity, his ego demanding that he regain control of a demonstration that was supposed to showcase his superior training and experience. But every technique he employed was met with responses that demonstrated capabilities he hadn't expected and couldn't easily counter. Riley's movement patterns were flowing like water on obstacles, redirecting his force rather than opposing it directly, using his momentum against him in ways that suggested martial arts, training that extended far beyond basic military combat instruction. Her positioning was constantly optimal, her balance never compromised, her readiness for escalation or de-escalation immediately available. Hospital. Corporal Martinez had moved closer to the training mat, his medical equipment ready for immediate deployment if the demonstration exceeded safe parameters. His assessment of the engagement dynamics suggested that Riley was deliberately preventing Williams from creating situations that would require medical intervention. "She's protecting him," Martinez observed to Yeoman Pierce, who had positioned herself where she could document whatever was developing. "He thinks he's demonstrating superior technique, but she's managing the engagement to prevent him from getting hurt." Pierce nodded, her administrative experience making her recognize potential liability issues that were developing beyond anyone's ability to control. "This needs to stop before someone gets seriously injured or before official investigations become necessary." "Master." Chief Kennedy had abandoned her position near the administrative area and was moving toward the training mat with purposeful strides, her expression showing the kind of grim determination that suggested she was prepared to intervene decisively to prevent further escalation. "That's enough," Kennedy called out, her voice carrying absolute authority. Demonstration terminated. All personnel stepped back from the training mat immediately. But Williams was committed beyond the point of rational retreat. His professional reputation depended on proving that his original assessment of Riley's capabilities had been correct. The mounting evidence that she possessed training levels that exceeded his expectations was making him increasingly desperate to reassert his authority through superior performance. "Negative." "Master Chief," Williams replied, his breathing slightly elevated from the physical engagement. "Demonstration continues until educational objectives have been achieved." Riley remained in perfect defensive positioning, her breathing steady despite the dynamic engagement, her awareness tracking not just Williams but every person in the watching crowd. When she spoke, her voice carried the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout the entire confrontation. "Sir, I recommend we conclude the demonstration. Educational objectives appear to have been achieved." The suggestion was delivered with respectful courtesy, but Williams interpreted it as challenge to his authority rather than reasonable safety recommendation. "I'll determine when educational objectives have been achieved, Petty Officer." Continued defensive demonstrations. Rodriguez had stopped recording entirely, his phone hanging forgotten as he recognized the serious implications of what was developing. The anticipated entertainment had transformed into something that made his stomach clench with dread about potential consequences and official investigations. "Sir," Rodriguez said urgently. "Maybe we should continue recording," Williams commanded sharply. "Our candidates need to see complete demonstrations, not partial exhibitions that don't provide full educational value." Brooks stepped onto the edge of the training mat, his senior instructor experience making him increasingly concerned about liability and safety protocols. "Sir, safety parameters suggest that dynamic engagement should be terminated and replaced with static technique demonstration." But Williams was operating from desperation now, his ego having committed him to proving his point regardless of mounting evidence that his Fundamental assumptions had been wrong. He increased his engagement intensity again, employing techniques that required more aggressive responses and higher skill levels to counter effectively. Riley's reaction was immediate and absolutely devastating to Williams' confidence. Her defensive capabilities scaled seamlessly to match his increased aggression, demonstrating levels of training and experience that made every assumption about her background seem ridiculous in retrospect. Her movement efficiency remained perfect even under increased pressure. Her counter-engagement timing became more precise rather than less controlled. Her tactical awareness expanded to encompass multiple potential threat vectors. While maintaining complete focus on the immediate engagement, Morrison moved closer to the training mat, his professional instincts recognizing that the demonstration was approaching parameters that exceeded safe training protocols. "That's advanced tactical combat training," he said to Brooks, his voice carrying amazement mixed with growing concern. "Military close-quarters combat operational levels." Brooks nodded grimly. "Beyond operational levels. That's specialized training, the kind reserved for personnel with specific mission requirements and security clearances." The watching candidates were beginning to show signs of serious discomfort with the situation's development. Several had moved closer together, their instincts telling them that whatever was happening was moving beyond normal training, demonstrations into territory that felt unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Tommy Harrison exchanged worried glances with Marcus Washington, both recognizing that their instructors were engaging in something that seemed to exceed appropriate parameters for educational demonstrations. Alexander Petrov remained analytical, but his assessment of the situation suggested that official intervention would soon become necessary. Williams attempted another escalation, employing a technique that required significant force and created potential for injury if not countered with precise timing and exceptional skill. His desperation was making him reckless, pushing beyond safe demonstration parameters in his determination to prove his superior capabilities. Riley's response was so perfectly executed that it left everyone watching in absolute silence. She redirected his force with surgical precision, used his momentum to create a controlled takedown that left him on the training mat without injury, and transitioned immediately into a restraint position that demonstrated complete tactical control while ensuring his safety and dignity remained intact. The entire sequence took less than 4 seconds. 4 seconds that demonstrated training levels, tactical competence, and combat capability that made everyone in the facility realize they had been catastrophically wrong about who Riley Thompson actually was and what her presence at Naval Air Station Meridian actually meant. Williams found himself on the training mat, controlled but unharmed, looking up at someone whose capabilities had just exceeded every parameter he'd used to evaluate military competence and professional qualification. Silence that followed was heavy, with the recognition that everything was about to change, and whatever happened next would redefine everyone's understanding of hidden capabilities, professional assumptions, and the dangerous consequences of judging people by their apparent positions rather than their actual qualifications. The silence that followed Riley's perfectly executed takedown stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Williams' labored breathing as he processed what had just occurred. Lying on the training mat, looking up at someone who had just demonstrated combat capabilities that exceeded his comprehension, Williams felt his entire worldview cracking. Like ice under pressure, Riley remained in the restraint position for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to demonstrate complete control, brief enough to preserve Williams' dignity, before smoothly transitioning back to a respectful standing position. Her breathing remained steady, her uniform barely disturbed, her expression maintaining the same professional neutrality she displayed throughout the entire confrontation. Chief Morrison stared at the sequence replay in his mind, his instructor experience struggling to catalog what he'd witnessed. "That wasn't self-defense," he said quietly, his voice carrying notes of awe mixed with growing unease. "That was advanced tactical neutralization. Military close-quarters combat at levels I've never seen outside of specialized operations training." Brooks had gone completely pale, his senior experience making him recognize implications that extended far beyond training demonstrations. The precision, the control, the tactical awareness, that's not standard military training. That's not even advanced military training. That's something else entirely. The assembled candidates stood frozen in place, their minds struggling to process what they'd witnessed. Tommy Harrison's technical aptitude allowed him to recognize that Riley's techniques had exceeded every parameter they'd been taught to expect from military combat training. Marcus Washington's athletic background made him appreciate the physical control and precision that had been demonstrated. But he couldn't understand how someone in a maintenance position had acquired such capabilities. Alexander Petrov remained analytical, but his assessment of the situation had shifted dramatically. His experience with different military systems had exposed him to various training methodologies. But what Riley had demonstrated suggested backgrounds that didn't match any conventional military career path he could identify. "Master." Chief Kennedy had reached the edge of the training mat, her expression showing the kind of grim satisfaction that suggested she'd anticipated this outcome while hoping it wouldn't be necessary. Her decades of experience had taught her to recognize when situations had moved beyond normal parameters and required immediate intervention from higher authority. "Levels, all personnel step back." "From the training mat," Kennedy commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority that made everyone in the facility immediately comply. "Training demonstration is terminated. Lieutenant Commander Williams, report to my office immediately for debriefing." Williams struggled to his feet, his movements showing the kind of careful control that suggested he was checking for injuries while processing the reality that his demonstration had ended with him being neutralized by someone he'd dismissed as irrelevant support personnel. His face cycled through emotions too rapidly to catalog shock, confusion, embarrassment, and growing dread about professional consequences. "Master Chief," Williams said carefully, his voice lacking the confident authority he'd maintained throughout the earlier confrontation. "I was conducting an authorized training demonstration to illustrate. You were conducting an unauthorized combat engagement with personnel whose background you hadn't verified." Kennedy interrupted, her voice carrying the kind of cold professionalism that suggested official investigations were already being considered. "You created liability issues, safety violations, and potential incidents requiring flag-level explanations." Rodriguez had abandoned his phone entirely, the device lying forgotten on the concrete floor as he struggled to understand what had just occurred. His anticipated entertainment had transformed into something that made him question everything he understood about military training and professional competence. "Sir," Rodriguez said hesitantly to Williams, "what just happened? How did maintenance personnel demonstrate capabilities that exceeded instructor levels?" Williams had no answer. His fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy, training standards, and professional qualifications had just been demolished by 4 seconds of combat engagement that had left him neutralized and controlled by someone whose capabilities he'd completely misunderstood. Brooks approached the training mat cautiously, his senior instructor experience making him increasingly concerned about official ramifications. "Master Chief, we need to document this incident properly. Safety protocols were violated, unauthorized combat engagement occurred, and personnel capabilities were demonstrated that don't match official records or training documentation." Kennedy nodded grimly. "Documentation is already being prepared. This incident will require complete investigation, review of all involved personnel records, and explanations to command authority about how authorized training demonstrations escalated into uncontrolled combat engagement. Hospital Corpsman Martinez had moved onto the training mat to assess Williams for potential injuries, his medical training making him automatically evaluate the physical consequences of the engagement. No apparent injuries, he announced after a brief examination. But combat engagement at that level could have resulted in serious medical emergencies if not controlled by exceptional technical skill. His observation carried implications that made everyone present realize how differently the demonstration could have ended if Rayleigh's capabilities had been less precise or her control less complete. Yeoman Pierce was documenting everything she'd witnessed, her administrative experience telling her that official reports would be required, and that accurate records would be essential for any subsequent investigations. "Master Chief, do you want me to prepare incident reports and notify command authority about the training demonstration exceeding authorized parameters?" "Affirmative," Kennedy replied. "Prepare complete documentation of all events, personnel involved, and safety protocols that were violated. This incident will require thorough review and official explanation." Logistics Specialist Johnson had remained near the edge of the crowd, his protective feelings toward fellow support personnel now completely overwhelmed by confusion about Riley's demonstrated capabilities. "Master Chief," he said hesitantly, "if Petty Officer Thompson has advanced combat training, why is she assigned to maintenance duties? Why aren't her qualifications documented in routine personnel files?" Kennedy's expression suggested that Johnson's questions were touching on information that required careful handling. Personnel assignments and qualification documentation are determined by factors that may not be apparent in routine records. Some assignments serve purposes that extend beyond obvious job descriptions. Riley had remained at attention beside the training mat throughout the post-engagement discussion, her posture unchanged despite having just demonstrated capabilities that had shocked everyone present. When Kennedy addressed her directly, her response maintained the same professional courtesy she'd displayed throughout the entire confrontation. "Petty Officer Thompson," Kennedy said carefully, "your performance today exceeded parameters expected from maintenance personnel. Do you have additional training or experience that should be documented in official records?" Rayleigh met Kennedy's eyes directly, and for a moment, something passed between them: recognition, understanding, shared awareness of information that couldn't be discussed in present company. "Master Chief," Riley replied, her voice carrying subtle undertones that suggested layers of meaning beneath the surface words. "My training background includes experiences that may require special documentation procedures and security clearance verification before complete discussion is appropriate." The phrase "security clearance verification" landed in the facility like a depth charge, sending shockwaves through everyone present. Security clearances implied classified information, specialized training, and background investigations that extended far beyond routine military assignments. Morrison stepped closer to the group surrounding Riley, his instructor instincts recognizing that the fight situation had just shifted into territory that exceeded his understanding and possibly his authorization level. "Master Chief, if security clearances are involved, should this discussion be relocated to a secure environment with appropriate personnel present?" Kennedy nodded slowly. "Affirmative. This discussion will be continued in a classified environment with proper authority levels represented. All personnel not directly involved in official documentation will resume normal duties immediately." Williams remained near the training mat, his mind still struggling to process what had occurred and what it meant for his professional future. The demonstration he'd designed to prove his authority and showcase proper military hierarchy had instead revealed that his fundamental assumptions about personnel capabilities and training backgrounds had been catastrophically wrong. The facility began to empty as personnel dispersed to resume normal duties. But the atmosphere had changed permanently. Everyone who had witnessed Rayleigh's demonstration carried with them the knowledge that support personnel could possess capabilities that exceeded obvious indicators, that professional assumptions could be dangerously wrong, and that military hierarchies were more complex than surface appearances suggested. And in the growing quiet of the training facility, Riley Thompson stood at attention beside the mat where she'd just demonstrated that some secrets were more significant than anyone had imagined, waiting for conversations that would finally address questions about who she really was and why her presence at Naval Air Station Meridian represented something far more important than routine maintenance duties. Within 30 minutes of the training demonstration's conclusion, Naval Air Station Meridian had transformed into a hive of activity that extended far beyond routine operations. Master Chief Kennedy's secure communications had triggered a cascade of official responses that brought personnel streaming onto the base with the kind of urgency typically reserved for national security incidents or high-level emergencies. Commander Patricia Steele Hawkins arrived first, her staff car pulling up to the administrative building with the precision of someone accustomed to crisis management. As the base's executive officer, Hawkins had overseen enough unusual situations to recognize when routine incidents escalated into matters requiring flag-level attention. Her stride across the facility carried the purposeful energy of someone prepared to handle whatever had triggered Kennedy's encrypted communications. Behind her came Captain Marcus Titan Rodriguez, no relation to the instructor Rodriguez, whose arrival in an unmarked vehicle suggested that this situation involved information requiring careful handling. As the base's intelligence officer, Captain Rodriguez specialized in personnel security issues and classification management that extended beyond normal administrative oversight. The final arrival was the most significant. Rear Admiral James Phoenix Mitchell, whose personal helicopter touched down on the base's landing pad with the kind of dramatic emphasis that made everyone present understand that whatever was developing had reached the highest levels of military attention. Mitchell's presence suggested that Riley Thompson's demonstration had triggered protocols reserved for matters of exceptional sensitivity. Williams found himself relegated to a holding area in the administrative building, his access to information restricted while senior personnel conducted discussions that apparently exceeded his security clearance level. The waiting was excruciating, giving him time to process the reality that his career had just taken a turn that might require explanations he wasn't prepared to provide. Chief Morrison, Petty Officer Rodriguez, and Senior Chief Brooks occupied a separate waiting area, their earlier entertainment completely forgotten as they realized they'd witnessed something that had attracted flag-level attention. Their phones had been confiscated, their movements restricted, and their access to information limited while official investigations proceeded. "What did we just witness?" Morrison asked quietly, his voice carrying the kind of uncertainty that suggested he was beginning to understand that Rayleigh's capabilities represented something far more significant than exceptional training. Brooks shook his head slowly. "I've been in the Navy for 22 years. I've seen advanced training, specialized operations, classified demonstrations. What that woman did on the training mat wasn't just exceptional, it was something I've never encountered in conventional military frameworks." Rodriguez, the instructor, not the captain, remained silent, his mind replaying the 4-second sequence that had neutralized Williams with surgical precision. The control, the tactical awareness, the combat capability that suggested training backgrounds that don't exist in normal military career paths. Meanwhile, in the secure conference room where Riley waited under what was officially described as protective custody, conversations were occurring that would reshape everyone's understanding of personnel assignments, classified operations, and hidden capabilities within military support structures. Riley sat at attention in the conference room, her posture unchanged despite the extraordinary attention her demonstration had attracted. When the door opened to admit Admiral Mitchell, Captain Rodriguez, and Commander Hawkins, she rose immediately to attention, her movements maintaining the precise military courtesy she'd displayed throughout the entire incident. "At ease, Petty Officer Thompson," Admiral Mitchell said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested he was accustomed to handling situations that exceeded normal parameters. "Please be seated. We have matters to discuss that require complete honesty and detailed explanation." Riley resumed her seat, her pale green eyes meeting Mitchell's gaze directly. "Yes, sir. I understand that my performance today exceeded expected parameters for my assigned position." Commander Hawkins consulted her tablet, scrolling through information that had apparently been compiled rapidly following the training demonstration. "Petty Officer Thompson, your personnel file contains several anomalies that require clarification. Extended training periods with no documented specifics. Performance evaluations using terminology typically reserved for specialized operations personnel. Classification codes that indicate restricted information requiring special clearance to access." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, his intelligence background making him particularly interested in the security implications of Riley's capabilities. "More significantly, your demonstration today indicated training levels that don't match any conventional military career path documented in your official records. Advanced tactical combat capability, precision control under pressure, situational awareness that suggests specialized preparation for high-risk operations." Riley remained silent, her expression neutral but alert, clearly waiting for direct questions that would allow her to provide information without violating whatever security protocols governed her actual background and training. Admiral Mitchell studied her carefully, his decades of experience making him recognize the kind of controlled professionalism that typically indicated exposure to classified operations and sensitive assignments. "Petty Officer Thompson," Mitchell said formally, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Are you currently assigned to Naval Air Station Meridian under official cover for purposes related to classified operations, personnel security, or intelligence gathering?" Riley met his eyes directly. "Sir, I am assigned to Naval Air Station Meridian under orders that include specific parameters for operational security and mission protection. My maintenance duties represent genuine work assignment, but they also serve purposes that extend beyond obvious job descriptions." The admission landed in the conference room like a tactical nuke, confirming suspicions while raising dozens of additional questions about the nature of Riley's actual assignment and the reasons for her presence at the training facility. Commander Hawkins looked up from her tablet, her expression showing the kind of controlled amazement that suggested she was processing information that challenged her understanding of personnel management and operational security. "Classified assignment parameters," Hawkins repeated. "Personnel security and mission protection." "Petty Officer Thompson, exactly what kind of mission requires combat-trained operators to work undercover as maintenance personnel at SEAL training facilities?" Captain Rodriguez had opened his own tablet and was accessing databases that required special clearance levels. "Admiral, preliminary research indicates that Petty Officer Thompson's classification codes match patterns used for specialized protective details and undercover security assignments, the kind reserved for high-value personnel protection or facility security monitoring." Riley remained at attention, but something in her posture suggested that official discussions were finally addressing the real reasons for her presence. rather than the surface assumptions that had dominated earlier interactions. "Sir," Riley said carefully, "my assignment parameters include monitoring training facility security, evaluating instructor performance and candidate assessment protocols, and providing protective oversight for personnel whose backgrounds may require additional security considerations." Admiral Mitchell nodded slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align in ways that explained Riley's exceptional capabilities while raising questions about the scope and complexity of whatever operation had placed her at the facility. "Protective oversight," Mitchell repeated. "Petty Officer Thompson, are you telling me that your maintenance assignment was actually a cover for security operations designed to protect specific personnel or monitor potential threats within the training program?" Riley's response was immediate and precise. "Yes, sir. My assignment includes protective responsibilities that require combat capability, tactical assessment skills, and the ability to operate effectively while maintaining operational security through apparent routine duties." The conference room fell silent as the three senior officers processed the implications of what Riley had just revealed. Her exceptional performance during the training demonstration hadn't been an anomaly. It had been a brief glimpse of capabilities that were deliberately hidden but available for deployment if circumstances required intervention. Commander Hawkins was the first to speak. "This explains the anomalies in your personnel file, the classification restrictions, and the advanced capabilities you demonstrated. But it raises serious questions about why we weren't informed that undercover security personnel were operating within our training programs." Captain Rodriguez was already accessing additional databases, his intelligence background making him automatically seek confirmation and additional details about operations that had apparently been conducted without his knowledge or oversight. "Admiral," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying notes of professional concern, "if undercover security operations are being conducted within our training facilities, there are coordination protocols that should have been followed and information sharing requirements that appear to have been bypassed." Admiral Mitchell's expression suggested that he was beginning to understand that Riley's presence represented part of a larger security framework that extended beyond base-level authority and involved operational decisions made at levels that exceeded local command structure. The conversation was about to reveal exactly how significant Riley Thompson's assignment actually was and why her cover had been considered necessary for protecting interests that extended far beyond routine training facility operations. Admiral Mitchell leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from professional curiosity to something approaching grim understanding. The pieces of a complex operational puzzle were beginning to align, and the picture they revealed was far more significant than anyone at Naval Air Station Meridian had suspected. "Petty Officer Thompson," Mitchell said slowly, "I'm going to need you to provide complete operational details about your assignment here. Classification levels, reporting structure, mission parameters, and the specific threats or concerns that required placing an undercover operator within our training facility." Riley straightened slightly, her posture indicating readiness to provide information that had been restricted until this moment. "Sir, my assignment operates under Joint Special Operations Command Authority. Classification level, Charlie 7 Alpha. Primary mission parameters include threat assessment, personnel protection, and operational security monitoring within SEAL training pipelines." The classification level designation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Charlie 7 Alpha represented some of the highest security protocols in the military, reserved for operations involving national security implications and potential threats to critical personnel or facilities. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his tablet, his intelligence background making him immediately recognize the significance of what Riley had just revealed. JSOC authority with Charlie 7 Alpha classification suggests potential threats to training facilities or specific personnel that required protective intervention. Admiral, this indicates security concerns at levels far above routine base operations. Commander Hawkins had gone pale, her administrative experience making her realize that her facility had been operating with undercover security personnel, whose presence indicated threats she hadn't been informed about. Petty Officer Thompson, exactly what kind of threats required JSOC-level protective oversight within our training programs? Riley consulted a small notebook she'd retrieved from her uniform pocket, referring to information that had apparently been prepared for eventual disclosure under appropriate authority levels. Sir, intelligence reports indicated potential infiltration attempts within SEAL training programs. Foreign intelligence services seeking to identify and recruit candidates. Domestic extremist groups attempting to place operatives within special operations pipelines. And organized crime elements trying to compromise training. Security for various purposes. The scope of the threats Riley described made everyone in the conference room realize that the training facility had been operating under security conditions far more complex and dangerous than anyone had understood. Admiral Mitchell frowned deeply. Infiltration attempts within SEAL training. Foreign intelligence recruitment operations. Domestic extremist infiltration. These are threats that would require the highest levels of protective response and operational security. Riley nodded. Yes, sir. My assignment included monitoring all personnel for indicators of potential security compromise, evaluating instructor performance for signs of external influence or inappropriate behavior, and maintaining readiness to intervene if direct threats to facility security or personnel safety developed. Captain Rodriguez was accessing additional databases, his security clearance apparently sufficient to verify some aspects of what Riley was describing. Admiral, I'm finding corroborating intelligence reports about increased foreign interest in U.S. special operations, training methodologies, and personnel recruitment. Multiple agencies have reported concerning activity levels around training facilities. Commander Hawkins looked between Riley and the senior officers, her mind processing the implications of having undercover security personnel operating within her command without her knowledge. This explains your exceptional capabilities, but it raises serious questions about operational coordination and command authority. Why wasn't Base Command informed about JSOC security operations within our facility? Admiral Mitchell's expression suggested he was beginning to understand that Riley's assignment represented part of a security framework that operated independently of local command structures for operational security. Reasons compartmentalized. Security operations, Mitchell said grimly. Information restricted to prevent compromise through routine administrative channels or potential security breaches within normal command structures. Riley confirmed his assessment. Yes, sir. My assignment required operational security that included limiting information to essential personnel only. Base Command notification would have increased the risk of operational compromise through routine administrative processing or potential security leaks. The revelation that their training facility had been operating under threat conditions requiring JSOC-level protective oversight was sobering enough. But the implications of compartmentalized security operations were even more significant. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his research. Admiral, if JSOC determined that security threats required undercover operative placement within our training programs, there are likely similar operations at other facilities. This suggests a coordinated security framework addressing threats at a national level. Riley nodded. Sir, my assignment is part of a comprehensive security program addressing potential threats to special operations training infrastructure. Multiple facilities have enhanced security measures, though specific operational details vary based on Local threat assessments and security. Requirements. Commander Hawkins was processing the reality that her facility had been under protective oversight that she hadn't been informed about. Operated by personnel whose capabilities exceeded anything in her experience. Petty Officer Thompson, during your assignment here, have you identified specific threats or security concerns that required intervention? Riley consulted her notebook again. Ma'am, routine monitoring has identified several individuals requiring enhanced scrutiny, including contractor personnel with unexplained facility access, training candidates with background anomalies that suggested potential security risks, and administrative personnel whose behavior patterns indicated possible external influence. The systematic nature of Riley's security assessment made everyone realize that her maintenance duties had provided perfect cover for comprehensive facility monitoring and threat evaluation. Admiral Mitchell leaned forward. Enhanced scrutiny of specific individuals. Petty Officer Thompson, have any of these security concerns required direct intervention or official reporting? Sir, most concerns have been addressed through routine security protocols and enhanced background verification. However, today's incident with Lieutenant Commander Williams raised concerns about instructor behavior that might indicate compromised judgment or potential security vulnerabilities. The suggestion that Williams' harassment might have represented a security concern rather than simple misconduct added another layer of complexity to the situation. Captain Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. Instructor behavior indicating potential security vulnerabilities. Are you suggesting that Williams' conduct represented more than inappropriate behavior toward support personnel? Rayleigh's response was careful but significant. Sir, aggressive behavior toward personnel whose backgrounds haven't been verified. Attempts to force demonstrations that could expose operational capabilities and resistance to appropriate security oversight can indicate several concerning possibilities. External influence, compromised judgment, or deliberate attempts to gather intelligence about facility operations and personnel capabilities. Commander Hawkins looked stunned. You're suggesting that Williams' harassment might have been an attempt to gather intelligence about your actual assignment and capabilities? Ma'am, aggressive probing of personnel capabilities, especially when combined with documentation attempts and resistance to security oversight, represents behavior patterns that require evaluation for potential security implications. Admiral Mitchell nodded slowly, which explains why your response was measured and controlled rather than simply defensive. You were managing the situation to protect operational security while assessing potential threats to facility security. Riley confirmed his assessment. Yes, sir. My response was designed to minimize security exposure while evaluating the nature and extent of potential threats represented by instructor behavior. The conference room fell silent as everyone processed the reality that what had appeared to be routine instructor misconduct might have represented something far more serious, requiring investigation and security assessment that extended beyond administrative discipline. Captain Rodriguez was already preparing communications equipment. Admiral, this situation requires immediate security review and potential investigation of Williams' background, associations, and possible external influences. Commander Hawkins was reviewing her own administrative records. I need to examine Williams' recent behavior patterns, facility access logs, and interactions with other personnel for additional indicators of potential security concerns. Admiral Mitchell looked at Riley with newfound respect. Petty Officer Thompson, your performance today protected operational security while providing critical intelligence about potential facility vulnerabilities. Your actions likely prevented security compromise while maintaining mission integrity. Riley remained at attention. Thank you, sir. My assignment continues until official mission completion or reassignment authorization. The conversation had revealed that Riley Thompson's presence at Naval Air Station Meridian represented far more than anyone had suspected, and that her exceptional capabilities served purposes that extended well beyond routine maintenance duties into the realm of national security and facility protection. The aftermath of Riley's revelation transformed Naval Air Station Meridian into the epicenter of a security investigation that would ripple through military intelligence networks for months to come. Within 6 hours of Admiral Mitchell's emergency communications, the facility had been quietly surrounded by additional security personnel whose presence was designed to be invisible to routine operations while ensuring complete containment of potential security breaches. Lieutenant Commander Williams found himself in a secure interrogation facility, his career hanging by threads as counterintelligence specialists conducted detailed background investigations into his associations, financial records, and recent behavioral patterns. The harassment he'd directed toward Riley was being examined not as simple misconduct, but as potential intelligence-gathering operations that might indicate foreign influence or domestic extremist connections. "I don't understand what's happening," Williams repeated for the 4th time to the stern-faced investigators reviewing his case. "I was conducting routine training demonstrations. I had no knowledge of any undercover operations or security concerns." The lead investigator, a woman whose credentials suggested extensive experience with personnel security cases, consulted her tablet before responding. "Lieutenant Commander, your aggressive attempts to force capability demonstrations from support personnel, combined with documentation efforts and resistance to security oversight, represent behavior patterns consistent with intelligence gathering operations." Williams felt his world crashing down around him as he realized that his ego-driven harassment had been interpreted through security frameworks that suggested far more serious implications than simple professional misconduct. Meanwhile, Chief Morrison, Petty Officer Rodriguez, and Senior Chief Brooks underwent separate debriefing sessions designed to evaluate their knowledge of Riley's actual assignment and assess their potential involvement in any security-related activities. Their cooperation was complete, their shock genuine, but the investigation protocols required thorough evaluation of everyone who had interacted with the undercover operative. "We had no idea," Morrison explained to his interviewer for the 3rd time. "Thompson performed maintenance duties exactly as expected for someone in her position. Her exceptional capabilities during today's demonstration were completely unexpected." The debriefing officer nodded. "Your shock appears genuine, but we need to verify that no information about Thompson's actual assignment was communicated through unofficial channels or inadvertent observations." Back in the secure conference room, Riley was providing detailed operational reports to Admiral Mitchell and a growing collection of intelligence personnel whose presence indicated that her assignment had been part of a much larger security framework than anyone had initially understood. "Comprehensive facility assessment," Riley reported, consulting detailed notes that had apparently been compiled throughout her 8-month assignment. Security vulnerabilities identified include inadequate visitor screening protocols, insufficient background verification for contractor personnel, and administrative systems that could be exploited for intelligence gathering purposes. Captain Rodriguez was documenting everything Riley reported, his intelligence background making him appreciate the thoroughness of her security evaluation. "These vulnerabilities represent potential compromise points for foreign intelligence services or domestic threat groups attempting to infiltrate training programs." Commander Hawkins reviewed Riley's assessment with growing concern about facility operations that had apparently been more vulnerable than anyone had realized. Petty Officer Thompson, your recommendations for addressing these security vulnerabilities will be implemented immediately. This assessment represents critical intelligence for protecting our training programs. Admiral Mitchell was coordinating with higher authority levels, his communications indicating that Riley's assignment and the security concerns it addressed extended far beyond single facility operations. JSOC headquarters confirms that similar security assessments are being conducted at multiple training facilities. Thompson's work here represents part of a comprehensive evaluation of Special Operations training security. Riley remained at attention throughout these discussions, her professional demeanor unchanged despite having revealed information that had triggered investigations extending far beyond Naval Air Station Meridian. "Sir," Riley said when directly addressed, "my operational assessment indicates that facility security has been significantly improved through enhanced awareness of potential threats and implementation of additional protective protocols. Mission parameters suggest that continued undercover assignment may no longer be necessary." The suggestion that her assignment might be concluding carried implications that extended beyond Riley's individual situation to broader questions about ongoing security, operations, and protective frameworks. Admiral Mitchell consulted his secure communications device before responding. "Petty Officer Thompson, JSOC headquarters is evaluating whether your mission here has achieved its primary objectives and whether reassignment to additional facilities or different operational parameters would better serve ongoing security requirements." Captain Rodriguez looked up from his documentation. "Admiral, if Thompson's assignment is concluding successfully, her assessment and recommendations represent valuable intelligence for improving security protocols at other training facilities. Commander Hawkins was already planning implementation of security improvements based on Riley's recommendations. Petty Officer Thompson, regardless of your future assignment status, your work here has identified critical vulnerabilities and provided essential intelligence for protecting our training programs." Riley nodded. "Ma'am, my assignment has been successful in achieving primary mission objectives. Facility security has been assessed, potential threats have been identified and addressed, and protective protocols have been enhanced through increased awareness and improved procedures." The success of Riley's mission carried broader implications for military security operations and the effectiveness of undercover protective assignments within training facilities. Admiral Mitchell received additional communications that indicated decisions were being made at the highest levels about Riley's future assignment and the broader security framework her mission had been part of. "Petty Officer Thompson," Mitchell announced, "JSOC headquarters has authorized mission completion and reassignment to advanced training programs that will utilize your exceptional capabilities in official operational capacities rather than undercover assignments." The revelation that Riley would be transitioning from undercover operations to official advanced training represented recognition of her capabilities and the value of her security assessment work. Captain Rodriguez smiled for the first time during the entire investigation. "Congratulations, Petty Officer Thompson. Your exceptional performance under extremely challenging circumstances has demonstrated capabilities that deserve official recognition and appropriate assignment." "Commander." Hawkins stood to shake Riley's hand. "Your work here has made our facility safer and our training programs more secure. Whatever your next assignment involves, you have the gratitude of everyone whose safety you've been protecting." Riley accepted the recognition with the same professional demeanor she'd maintained throughout her assignment. "Thank you, sir and ma'am. Serving to protect training programs and facility security has been an honor." regardless of the assignment format. As the investigation concluded and security protocols were implemented, Naval Air Station Meridian returned to training operations with enhanced awareness of potential threats and improved protective measures. The candidates who had witnessed Riley's demonstration carried with them lasting lessons about hidden capabilities, professional assumptions, and the reality that military service included complexities and security considerations that extended far beyond obvious indicators that Lieutenant Commander Williams faced administrative discipline and career consequences that would serve as permanent reminders about the dangers of judgment based on appearances and the serious implications of behavior that could compromise operational security. And Riley Thompson, her undercover assignment complete, prepared for new challenges that would utilize her exceptional capabilities in official capacities, knowing that her work at Naval Air Station Meridian had contributed to protecting some of America's most important training programs and the warriors they produced. The story that had begun with mockery and produced harassment had concluded with recognition, security enhancement, and the revelation that true service often occurred in hidden forms, protecting those who served openly while maintaining the safety and security that made their training and operations possible. Her 8 months of quiet competence had achieved more than anyone could have imagined, proving that sometimes the most important missions were carried out by those whose capabilities remained hidden until circumstances required them to be revealed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.